Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by our friends over at Celsius. I am John Ledyard. Along with me today, also from pewterreport.com, is the illustrious Scott Reynolds, returned from his suspension back to the podcast. Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I was suspended to the frozen Midwest to see my daughter Ellie out in Manhattan, Kansas. And so I've come back now to warmer temperatures in Florida, thankfully. But I missed the polar vortex, though. So I wasn't there for these sub-freezing temperatures. I was there over the weekend and actually had pretty decent weather. It was like lows in the 20s, highs in the 30s. So, but yes, good to be back here in Florida talking Bucs football with you and our Pewter Report audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk a lot about the defensive side of the ball. If you haven't heard, go back to yesterday and listen to Mark Cook and I break down the offensive side of the ball. We did that in pretty good detail. I think we got through all the position groups, broke a lot of that down, and we're going to roll through the defensive side of the ball. So we'll be a little shorter of a pod than usual today because I got to get out of here by 4:40, but we're going to roll through the offense or the defensive side of the ball, make sure we break all this down. But first, we want to remind everybody, as we always do, that this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Celsius.
John, the refreshing taste of Celsius heat. That's what I'm drinking today.
Beautiful thing.
I got the blueberry pomegranate.
I just threw one of those in the fridge, though, so that'll be up next.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to work out after the show, and what I love about Celsius heat is it fuels my workout and, more importantly, hydrates me. And this is the healthiest performance drink you're going to find out there. And I love this blueberry pomegranate taste. Didn't think I would. It's a top 5 flavor for me. And if you want to find out more about where you can get Celsius, go to Celsius.com, click on the store locator, and they'll point you into the direction of the Celsius locations near you. I actually did that, John, out in Manhattan. My daughter Ellie wanted some. I've got her on that subscribe and save from Amazon, but she wanted to try different flavors. So I clicked on the store locator. We found some in Manhattan, Kansas. They've got about 6 different locations. So we stocked your fridge up with a bunch of those and including some of these Celsius heat. And if you want to order them from Amazon, best place to do that to save some money. The best way to do that is to go to pewterreport.com, click on those Celsius banners. That lets Celsius know that, hey, Pewter Report turned you on to Celsius. And then from clicking those banner ads, you go right to Amazon. You can buy them in bulk and save a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like a good plan to me. And I know Celsius certainly tastes great. So anybody who out there looking for a good energy drink, it is the best, man. I cannot emphasize it enough. Some people have asked why I'm in a closet today. It's a good question. Instead of that beautiful office with the backdrop that I normally have, well, there's a couple reasons for that. One, sound quality is actually very good in a walk-in closet, or it's supposedly supposed to be. I've also been breaking up a little bit on the podcast, and people have told me, so I'm trying to location, but more than anything, until we get a new router, that is. But more than anything, there's construction going on outside my house. So I'm in my house, like in the middle of the street, but we're at the end of that. We're the last house on the street right now, or it's a newly developed plan. So they will be building houses next to mine. And so I'm not sure what that's going to sound like. So walk-in closet it was. We'll go with that through a couple. We'll see if we end up sticking back here or not as the show progresses. But we do want to talk defensive side of the ball. Scott, because Bucs have some questions coming up on the defensive line. Ndamukong Suh and Shaq Barrett are free agents.
Right.
Suh, obviously older at this point, was the second oldest defensive tackle in the league to take a snap this season, 34 years old. Shaq Barrett, not quite aging yet, good enough to be in position for his first big contract. Right. Big offseason for him after playing on the tag and playing for pretty cheap money before that per NFL standards. So those two guys, both at the crossroads with this team, both have said they want to come back. The Bucs have said they want both back. Right. My question to you, Scott, is do you see those guys having leverage because the Bucs don't have, maybe not Suh so much at his age, but Shaq Barrett, if he were to leave, what are the Bucs going to do at edge rusher, right? I mean, there isn't a lot of options. Anthony Nelson's certainly not ready for that role in the current roster.
Right. Well, you're talking about not a lot of options in-house right now. Right. However, there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of young pass rushers on this market. When I say young, keep in mind Shaq Barrett's 28. He won't be 29 until November. Okay, but and he doesn't have a whole bunch of miles on the tires because he was a rotational pass rusher in Denver, and he's also been very durable. John, he's had a couple of really years in Tampa here the last 2 years where he hasn't missed a game. So he's been a perfect fit for this offense. For this defense. He has been very durable. There's a lot to like about him. And a lot of times in the NFL, it's what have you done for me lately, right? That's what you're looking at in terms of paying some of these guys in free agency. Well, he was a borderline MVP, right, in the Super Bowl. And then the other thing is when you look at Ndamukong Suh, I mean, he had a sack and a half in the Super Bowl. And certainly his presence felt. I think he had a better year in 2020 than he did in 2019, which was his first year in Tampa. And I think he can come back a lot cheaper than he played at last year at around $8 million. I think that they can probably get him for another million or two less than he made last year. Shaq Barrett, though, different story. They franchised him this past year, and John, he's kind of been on record saying he wants to break the bank. The problem is you look at this. There's no way New Orleans can keep Trey Hendrickson, their top sacker, with 13 and a half sacks, 25 quarterback hits. He's a bigger guy, 6'4", 270. Might not play the run as well, but he's 26. And there's a lot of 26-year-old guys that are going to be on the free agent market. You look at Yannick Ngakoue from Baltimore, 8 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. He was a pass rusher extraordinaire at Jacksonville before that, 26 years of age. Very similar undersized guy like Shaq, 6'2", 246. But a couple other guys, Romeo Okwara up in Detroit. He gave Donovan Smith fits up there and actually got a sack in that game. A younger guy, 26 years of age, 10 sacks, 20 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles, 6'4", 274. Throw in Carl Lawson, 6 sacks, 32 quarterback hits for the Bengals. Matthew Judon, who's in that same age range as Shaq Barrett at age 28, going to be 29 this year. 6 sacks, 21 quarterback hits. Leonard Floyd, a little older at 29, 11 sacks, 19 quarterback hits out there.
I don't know if any of those guys are as good as Shaq. Do you think that, and also this too, Scott, like if you let Shaq go, then you're just paying somebody else pretty comparable money. At that point, you might as well just have paid Shaq, right?
Well, it really depends on what these guys are willing to get. And keep in mind, what they're willing to take coming to what I believe is the NFC favorite to return to the Super Bowl. So, and listen, I mean, the cap is what it is. Jason Light and Mike Greenberg, they will draw a line in the sand and they say, we're not going to go over whatever that amount is, 17, 18, 20 million for Shaq. I don't know what that number is. Shaq's agent and the Buccaneers will know what that is. But that to me is something that bears watching because they're certainly not held hostage to Shaq Barrett, right?
Right.
There's a lot of other pass rushers. You can throw Hassan Reddick, Arizona Cardinals first-round pick. He had 13 sacks. Granted, I think like 5 or 6 came in one game, but 5 forced fumbles. He's a really undersized guy at 6'1", 235.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, you're right. There are options out there for sure. It's just, man, I mean, Shaq Barrett has done obviously a lot of really good things in Tampa Bay, I think. And so I think everybody's prefers to keep him around, but then it becomes this question, like you're saying, like, where's the leverage at and all of that. I think we both expect him to be back, right? I mean, we think that that's probably going to happen. And we think, again, with Suh, it's like, okay, if, leverage wise, you could go play somewhere else if you wanted to for one more year, but do you really want to do that? I think that both sides want him to be back. And I think that money, I mean, at this point in Suh's career, if you're still playing, like you're probably making more money off the field, honestly, with all his things that he has going on. And so I just think that has to be probably like an ancillary factor to him. It's more about winning the rings after, especially given how much money he's made in his career.
Sure. There's also been some posturing, right, John? You talk about Jason Light saying we're going to bring the band back together. Bruce Arians, we want everybody to come back. We have the resources to do that with the cap room. And the Bucs are in really good shape, better than the Panthers, the Falcons, or the Saints. And But at the same time, you hear the posturing from the other side. Shaq Barrett saying he wants to break the bank. So a lot of this right now is posturing. We'll see. Is Shaq willing to take the hometown discount? Because he's kind of talked out of both sides of his mouth. He wants to break the bank. At the same time, he loves the fit and feels like this is home for him. And he loves playing opposite JPP and for Todd Bowles. So we'll see when the rubber meets the road. I wouldn't be surprised, though, at all if they let Shaq test free agency. If they can't get a deal done, let him go out there and see what his market value is, because I do believe that if Shaq does have an offer, that he and Drew Rosenhaus will go to the Buccaneers and say, this is what the market is willing to pay. Do you want to match it? And then the Buccaneers will say, maybe we will, and if not, we'll see if a guy like Yannick Ngakoue or some of the other players I mentioned want to come to Tampa for a little bit cheaper and a little bit younger too, to replace Shaq. But I do see Shaq hitting free agency unless he takes a hometown discount to stay.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're talking about a Bucs team that I think I've said on past podcasts is a top three, going to be top three in cap space for 2022, probably number one team, I think, for 2023. There's just not a lot in the books for those years right now. So it gives you a ton of flexibility this year to be able to do whatever you want to do. When people ask, can they bring back Chris Godwin, Lavonte David, Shaq Barrett, and Ndamukong Suh, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown? Yes, there's no question. The answer is yes. The question is just, what are you willing to do in terms of flexibility? Can they do it without screwing themselves over for future years? Yes. Can they do it without having a few hurdles to jump through in future years? Probably not. That's probably part of it. Whenever you keep a team together this good, that's probably part of it. Part of that, Scott, too, is looking at 2022. Where they have a bunch of free agents that come available. And I'm right about this, I think, next week, but maybe in Bucs briefing, but they have a bunch of free agents that become available, but they also have this kind of, to me, that's the group where you're going to let a lot of people walk in that group. To me, that there's a lot of good players, Alex Kappa, Jordan Whitehead, even Ronald Jones. I know fans are excited about the direction he's taken, but to me, those are the guys you're probably not going to pay. Not premium positions or premium roles on your team. Good players, but guys that you have to be able to replace for cheaper in free agency or through the draft, not necessarily, or through guys that are on your current roster. Mike Edwards playing or Antoine Winfield maybe playing more Jordan Whitehead's role, and Mike Edwards playing more free safety. And so those are things you have to be able to answer. To me, those are the guys that have to be replaced. I don't know that is Shaq Barrett or that is Chris Godwin. To me, those guys are very hard to replace. Those are the guys that I'd spend money on next year. The O.J. Howards, the Ronald Jones, the Alex Kappas, the Jordan Whiteheads. I'm trying to think the Will Golstons, if he's still around. Golston's another one. $5.5 million this year due. Obviously, he's going to start the way the roster is currently constructed, so you're probably okay with paying him that. Maybe you ask him to take a little bit of a pay cut. We'll see how that unravels itself. But again, he's another guy. Last year of his deal, so he'll be a free agent. Those are the kind of guys you can replace. Those are the kind of guys you let walk. The Shaq Barretts, especially at his age and his character, and knowing the scheme the way that he does and knowing what you're going to get out of him, not something about Yannick Ngakoue, not something about some of these other people that are going to be out there and going to be available. And so, I think you look at it that way and you say, okay, that's a guy that I want to, even if I'm tweaking things for 2022, those are the kind of guys I need to keep around long term. They're the hard ones to figure out how to replace down the road.
John, because Shaq's going to turn 29 in November. And again, not a lot of miles on the tires because he's a rotational player behind Von Miller, out there in Denver. But the interesting thing is, how long do you sign Shaq Barrett for? Is he 4-year deal, 3-year deal?
That would be my guess. Yeah.
Right.
My guess would be 4 years, and the first three, the guarantees are probably a lot are in the first 3 years, and most of the cap hit comes in 2022, 2023. Right. And that would be my guess. Yeah.
And they're not going to be franchising Shaq again. I think that's safe to say that if someone's going to get the franchise tag, it's going to be Chris Godwin. Right. I believe that's probably the way they're going to go there.
Right. And either way, depth and youth. I know we need to move on to linebacker, but depth and youth, definitely question marks right on the defensive line. Defensive tackle, edge rusher, Jason Pierre-Paul, another guy, by the way, 2022. To me, at that point, you let Jason Pierre-Paul walk. Maybe a 1-year deal cheap, but he's not, what's he making now? 10, 11, 12, something like that, 13. I don't remember, but you're not going to re-sign him for that after 2020. So again, that is to me, 2022 is the year where you've got to say goodbye to some people and be ready to replace those people. That's what this year's free agency, last year's draft, this year's draft, those guys developing Khalil Davis, developing Tyler Johnson, developing Mike Edwards, like those guys have to be developing, even an Aaron Stinney or an offensive lineman you draft this year, or John Molshin. Like, you have to prepare those guys to step in after 2022. For this season, I want to keep as many of these free agents in place, and then I think you're going to end up being fine, because the 2022 guy you really want to sign is Carlton Davis, and we'll get to him in a second. Let's talk a little bit, Scott, if we can, about linebacker. Lavonte David, free agent, 31? I think he's going to be 32 this summer. Yeah, 31 years old. He'll be 32 this summer, I think. Right. If I'm remembering right. Okay, so what do you do? Is it a 3-year deal, 2 years, guaranteed?
I think I think you do 3 years with 2 years guaranteed. I think that's fair for Lavonte. I think what's not fair for Lavonte, whose current average per year contract right now is 10.5. You look at Bobby Wagner, the guy who I think Lavonte is in a class, the same class as Bobby Wagner in terms of the player. They're about the same age. But Bobby Wagner, because he's been on that Seattle roster, has made all the Pro Bowls that Lavonte hasn't. Yeah. And the thing is, because of those Pro Bowls and those playoff appearances and Super Bowl runs and all that, he's making a lot more money. I mean, we're talking millions more than what Lavonte is making. So my concern is I don't want to break the bank for Lavonte David, who was not nearly as splashy as he was before. And when you look at
you're a popular man today, Scott.
I am, yes.
Get back in town and everybody wants to meet up.
I know. You look at Bobby Wagner, $18 million. There's just no way that and that's what he's making his average. So I don't believe that he's
going to. Bobby Wagner signed that when he was younger, right? So that
correct. Yeah.
It's kind of about when it's hitting.
Really, it was a 3-year extension. 3 years at $54 million with a $15 million signing bonus. So he actually signed that back when he was 28, 29. Okay. And the problem with Lavonte is he signed a longer deal when he did. That was in Jason Light's, I believe, second year as a general manager. Right. Yeah, it was in 2015. So the problem is when he signed that 5-year, $50 million extension. Now, it did include $25 million in guaranteed money. Right. But at the time it was for $10 million. So Bobby Wagner signing just a couple years later, you saw that linebacker market jump up. And the thing is I don't think that linebacker market's going to be that strong for an off the ball linebacker in a year where the cap is down. Right. So maybe you top out at $13 million average per year for Lavonte David, give him a bump. But in my opinion, you're looking at maybe $10 to $12 million. I'd see that here. What Ty is saying, 10 to 12 million. I think you give him a bump to probably 12 to 13 million per year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, you're Lavonte David. You spent your whole career in Tampa Bay. They just started winning. You just won a Super Bowl. You know they could do it again. I just don't know why you'd want to leave at this point. To me, Shaq Barrett's situation is more complicated. I think they get it done. But to me, like, there's more options for Shaq Barrett. He's going to play, 4 more years. It's his first big payday. You might want to hit the market, and see what's out there. Give the Bucs a chance to match, like you said. There's other factors to consider. Lavonte David's already been paid. He's already made that money. I'm not saying so what's is he going to leave for $2 million more a year? Is that worth it to him?
Yeah,
I just don't think that it is.
He will have made every single penny. Now, of course, this is before taxes, right? Uncle Sam's going to take half of it, but
hey, still, not in Florida, baby. That's another advantage for.
Well, but he's in an upper income tax bracket. But the thing is you're looking at $50.25 million that he's made since signing that extension, right? And then he was on his rookie deal before that, so his total earnings are pushing $55 million for Lavonte now that he's made in the NFL. So I agree with you. What is he going to do? Get an extra million or two over the next couple of years to move on to a worse team that probably won't be a Super Bowl contender? I don't think so.
Right. I don't either. And so, I really think he's going to be back. Now, here, let me ask you this, Scott, and we'll move through linebacker pretty quickly. But Do you think Lavonte David even hits free agency, or did the Bucs sign him before March 17th?
I think the Bucs sign him before free agency. And I want to clarify something. When I said Shaq becomes a free agent, that means he hits free agency. I think that the market, I think that they want to see where, and not just the Bucs, but other teams with all these edge rushers that are going to be hitting the market. They want to see kind of what the hierarchy is. They don't want to overpay. No team wants to overpay this year because there's a cap reduction. So in my opinion, that's where you look at hitting free agency and seeing what Shaq is worth. But Lavonte, I think he re-signs beforehand. I think the Buccaneers want to have a couple of these deals done. Maybe Rob Gronkowski and Ndamukong Suh, Lavonte David, maybe Ryan Suckup, the kicker. Get a couple of these deals done before free agency, and then tag Chris Godwin if you can't reach a long-term deal, and then go on. But here's the interesting thing about linebacker, John. The other linebackers you have, Dan Buchanan is not going to be back. Jack Sitchie, I mean, the guy's Mr. Glass. I like Jack. He cannot stay healthy. So he's nothing more than a special teams role player right now. But you need to get somebody in the hopper. Lavonte's been pretty dependable, missing a game or two here or there over the last 3 or 4 years total. So he's been very dependable. But if something happens to him, Kevin Minter maybe comes back for the veteran minimum at age 31, but you're still looking at probably $1 million or so for his age. And I think you want to get another young guy. So this might be the year the Buccaneers invest something more than a day 3 pick in a linebacker to draft the eventual replacement, especially if you're only adding maybe 2 or 3 year deals or 2 or 3 years to Lavonte's deal.
Right, yeah, and just to get to a couple questions real quick, how much is Gronk asking for? How much is Antonio Brown asking for? We don't know exactly what they're asking for. We do know that I feel pretty confident that Gronk will be back. I wrote about Antonio Brown today over in my Bucs briefing, so go check that out. I talked about his role with the team, potential costs, asked a couple cap experts about what they're thinking he's going to be. They think 1 year, $3 to $5 million, like that's going to be it, and they don't think he'll get much better on the market, so they think it's a good chance that he's back for a cheap cost like that. I tend to agree with them. If that's all that's going to be out there for Antonio Brown, his next court date, based on the research I could find, I don't know how many of these things happen. We don't know about him in the public, but the next thing I could find for a civil suit for the sexual assault and rape allegations is going to be in December of 2021. So that got pushed back significantly. That was supposed to be basically a year before that point. So that may make teams feel like he's going to be around, he's going to be available. So we'll see what happens. But I think you'd be probably in the $3 to $5 million range for a 1 year, 2 year, 1 year, 2 year type contracts. And again, it may be 2 years for AB, maybe 2 years for Gronk, and maybe 2 years for Sue, just to spread out the hit and things like that, to spread out the contract. Probably more likely 1 year for Sue, but maybe 2 years for those other guys. My guess is they're all three are going to end up in the $3 to $5 million range. That would be my best guess for those guys, is that they'll end up in that range. I see a couple of questions about Adrian Peterson. The Buccaneers have passed on Adrian Peterson several times that he's been a free agent and been on the market, and he's just getting to the point now with his age where I just don't see the Buccaneers investing in him. And I think the only way they might, and of course, listen, they just had LaShawn McCoy in, right? So it's not like they're not looking at players over 30, but the difference is Adrian Peterson's 35, and he'll be 36 this year. Does he bring more to the table than LaShawn McCoy from a running perspective? Yeah, I'm not ruling it out. It would have to be a Tom Brady wants him kind of situation. But I do think that there are a couple of other guys that Tom Brady might have his eye on for a running back. James White, Rex Burkhead, Deion Lewis, all three of those guys played with Brady in New England. All three are free agents. All three are that LaShawn McCoy role, that third down pass catching running back out of the backfield. And I think they would go in that direction rather than Adrian Peterson. Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, Adrian Peterson doesn't offer this team anything really. I don't, to me, I don't have there's just nothing. Like, what is it? He's not been a great receiver for a couple of years now. He's not been using that role. He's older. He doesn't help them beyond the season. They need to find somebody who can help them long-term at the position. Why? I just don't know why to me, he's a non-factor. And OBJ, we talked about him on the pod yesterday. Not going to happen either. Dragon Lope says, let's go, boys. Thoughts on AB versus Shaq, who is more valuable to this team? Definitely. Your top edge rusher is more valuable than your number 3 wide receiver, especially on a team with this many weapons offensively. So no question there.
John, even if they bring back Shaq, who will be 29 in November, and you have Jason Pierre-Paul on the final year of his deal at age 31, and even if those guys stick around, right? If you sign Shaq to a 3 or 4 year deal, then he's one guy. And then JPP, maybe he sticks around for another year after 20.
Maybe,
right? But you got to develop a young guy in the hopper. It's not Cam Gill. It's not Anthony Nelson. You've got to draft a guy. And that's why we had Quincy Roche in Miami.
Cam Gill catching a stray this morning. I said Cam Gill just out here chilling, listening to the pod, just catching a stray from you.
Did he? Well,
you didn't expect to be mentioned, but
no. Well, listen, I want to see more from Cam Gill. I like the fact that he got a half a sack in the Super Bowl. I want to see more.
No, I don't think he's the guy either. It's just hilarious.
Yeah.
No, it's the position of need. I mean, when you look at the team, that and defensive tackle are where, and we talked about running back on offense, but again, if you can find a game changer at running back, edge rusher, and defensive tackle, the running back is clearly the third priority out of that group. Even if your edge or your defensive tackle is going to be your number 3 or number 4 guy this season, those positions are just that much more valuable for sure. Yeah. Okay, the secondary, Scott, and you mentioned needing to find depth at linebacker at some point in the draft. Agreed. That'll be something they look at over the next couple of years, similar to tight end on the offensive side. But the secondary, right now, I just feel like this cornerback group is almost ready to roll. I mean, I'm not sure they're going to all be locked down, but they're definitely going into next season. No question about it. Jamel Dean, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Carlton Davis, those are the 3 guys. That's who they want to ride with for next season. So no competition really at the cornerback spots. The number 4 guy, Ross Cockrell, they'd like to have him back. Cockrell played well enough to probably get a little more money from another team this offseason if he wants to go that route. He has pursued that route in the past. Also, he cares about winning, and so maybe he wants to stay, but it would be cheap. I mean, the Bucs aren't going to pay. Somebody else would pay him more, I bet, to be their third or fourth corner.
John, you mentioned cheap so that we can rule out Patrick Peterson, right?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Patrick Peterson. Did anybody watch him play last year or the year before even?
Yeah, and listen, I get it. I mean, there are some name guys, Patrick Peterson, Adrian Peterson. These are name guys, but in their prime, yeah, maybe. But the problem is in their prime, they're worth tens of millions of dollars. The Bucs just don't have the cap room for it. And as much as Jason Light and Bruce Arians love Patrick Peterson, the person and the player that he was in Arizona, he's just not worth the money right now. And at the same time, too, you got to figure out, is Sean Murphy-Bunting the guy we saw in the postseason or the regular season? What happened to Jamel Dean? He kind of just was he was a steady Eddie as a player at cornerback when he wasn't in the concussion protocol.
Yeah,
he had the splash play against the Packers early on, but we didn't see Jamel Dean elevate his game throughout the rest of the season. And he's a player that this team has the 3rd round pick invested in. Carlton Davis is going to be in a contract year. So, John, you want to see what you have going forward. And keep in mind, all 3 of those guys were good enough to win a Super Bowl with. So I don't think that adding Patrick Peterson to the mix at his age with his declining skill set and his money, he'd be making more money than any of those starters for the Bucs. Does anything for the secondary right now?
No, it's going to be a cheap guy like a Ross Cockrell type, somebody who's been a career backup, solid, decent player. That's going to be it. It's going to be one of those kind of guys that can play inside, outside, probably. If maybe it's Cockrell, maybe it's not. I think is the special teams dude still Ryan Smith? Is he still under contract, I think, for this up guy? I can't remember.
He'll be a free agent.
But he's a cheap guy, same as Andrew Adams, basically in the secondary. Those are 2 special teamers. Which probably want him back. I don't know that either have done anything to command a lot of money from someone else. I mean, they're solid special teamers. I don't think either of them are like Matthew Slater or somebody like that on special teams. And so, they're guys that are probably back. Bucs probably want them back. There's really not a lot to talk about the secondary. I mean, you have Antoine Winfield for 3 more years on his contract. Mike Edwards, 2 more years on his contract. Those are clearly your guys for the next couple of years. And then obviously Whitehead going into a contract year, but I don't think you're looking to draft to replace Whitehead at this point in time, especially when you have Edwards waiting in the wings and him and Winfield are so versatile. I just think you're playing it out with those 3 this year. And then if you need a third safety next year in free agency, you go get one, or maybe Andrew Adams is that guy. I mean, they've liked him pretty much his whole career. He's been
Yeah.
been more of a valued presence in Tampa Bay than anywhere else. And so I think maybe he stays
and
around, but I can't see a draft pick like other than late day 3 on the secondary, right, Scott?
It really depends. And the reason I say that is because if you look at if you pay Carlton Davis, I don't know that you can pay Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy-Bunting when they
right. Oh no, yeah, right. But they still have 2 more years each, right?
Correct, but they have 2 more years each. So if you do, if you do pay Carlton Davis, right, then what you can do is you can draft another young cornerback instead of signing a Ross Cockrell, or maybe you sign Ross, let those guys battle it out for that 4th corner in training camp. But if you have a promising rookie, what I mean by draft a corner is if there is tremendous value, if the Bucs have a guy with the 2nd round grade that's there in the 4th round, I could see it happen. Or maybe a late 1st round, early 2nd round grade for whatever reason. He's there when they pick in the 3rd round, and it's a real value pick. Then I could see them doing it just because you want to have another guy in the hopper to replace either Dean or Murphy-Bunting or both, to pair with Carlton Davis down the road. Keep in mind, Jason Light likes that 2nd, 3rd round when it comes to drafting secondary players. He's drafted Justin Evans. He's drafted Antoine Winfield Jr., Sean Murphy-Bunting in the 2nd round. In the 3rd round, we've got Mike Edwards, Jamel Dean. Also, Carlton Davis was a 2nd round pick. So that's kind of the
4th rounders, Jordan Whitehead. So yeah, I mean, it's you're right. There's no doubt he's gone crazy in those rounds drafting DBs. My guess this year is the year it doesn't happen, though. At some point, I think you trust the guys you've drafted. So, but again, you're right. If there's a great player available and he loves them, again, everything's on the table when you're the Bucs, because you don't really have any. Like, it's not right now. There's not a huge hole going into this draft like there was even.
And John, when it comes to free agency, they've got some leverage, right? I mean, they still have Tom Brady. Who doesn't want to play with Tom Brady? Who doesn't want to go either to the Super Bowl if you're a free agent import, or go back to the Super Bowl if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneer?
Yeah.
So they have leverage to say, come to Tampa, and make a little bit less. It's almost like the Patriots, John. We've seen it for years with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady up there. I think you're going to see some players that are willing to take less to play in Tampa in 2020.
Absolutely. We continue a lot of these discussions, by the way, in Locker Room. It's a social audio app that just does a lot of awesome stuff, and I'll get on there and we'll often discuss with fans some of the stuff in even more depth, and we get to hear from you, the fans. You guys get to jump on and talk and chat as well. So it's a Locker Room is an app that is really changing the way we even talk sports. It's the only place for live audio conversations about the takes, rumors, news, and teams you care about. React to sports news as it happens. Gather all your friends and watch parties for the biggest games. Rep your favorite teams and find your community. Better sports talk is just a tap away. Download on the Apple App Store and join the conversation. That's Locker Room. Locker Room is the app. I think it's only for iOS users still, but they are working on an Android version as well. But definitely check that out. Get on there. We'll actually be going live tonight a little bit after 7. We'll be going live tonight. We'll chat a little bit about Antonio Brown. Other potential available free agents. We haven't talked about that much that the Bucs could potentially look into signing. We're not going to worry about cost as much unless we're talking about bigger name guys. I'll shoot those down, but some of that will be something that we'll discuss on Locker Room later today. Again, that'll be a little bit after 7, but also get that Locker Room app, because it's where we'll get on and do a little bit of free agent chatting as well, as that we move into that time of the year. Well, there's going to be a lot of things flying around, a lot of quick news. We'll jump in there and we'll be talking about those things as it goes. So yeah, make sure you tune in for that. JJ Watt or Von Miller, 10 to 13 million range. Not touching Von Miller with his stuff going on off the field right now for sure. JJ Watt, I wrote about it. You can look it up on PReport.com. Scott, you wrote about it a little bit. Again, I think it's a possibility. I know Tampa could do it, and they could do all these other things we're talking about too. To me, I think the biggest thing, and I said this yesterday in the podcast, I just think Tampa Bay isn't going to commit money to somebody outside the organization until they've got their guys back that they want back. So if JJ Watt is still a free agent when free agency starts, or when free agency, has gone by a couple of days and they've got Shaq Barrett back and they've got Chris Godwin back, or they know Shaq Barrett's not going to be back or something like that. Right. To me, like, that is the point in time in which they might reach out to JJ Watt. I don't think he's still going to be around then. Green Bay, Buffalo, Cleveland, too many possibilities.
And it's interesting because I think that he would take the Will Golston spot as the tech defensive end.
Cut Golston, probably cut Brate.
Right.
There's your cap room for him.
Yeah, he's not the edge rusher. He's not the guy to replace Shaq Barrett.
Right. I mean, he does have most of his production off the edge as a pass rusher of late, but he also is a deadly inside rusher. He's definitely not a drop like Shaq Barrett is, where he can drop back and do those kind of things that Todd Bowles like. So you're right, it is pretty different.
All right, so here's a question here. Do you see him playing a 3 technique defensive tackle spot? The biggest thing is that Ndamukong Suh's bigger than J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to anchor against the run.
It's not a 1-to-1 replacement for sure.
Right.
Yeah. To me, J.J. Watt would play inside more than any other edges currently do right now. Right. But honestly, to me, it would be more of like a passing downs thing where, again, you could go with 5, but also you would just rotate. To me, you just get Suh off the field way more. I mean, he's playing 75-80% of snaps his whole career, basically.
Right.
And he's getting older. I mean, he's going to be the oldest D tackle to take a snap in the league probably next season after being second oldest this year. And so eventually, as great a shape as he keeps himself in, he's just not that impact player on passing down. So to me, when you're in your base defense, you would play J.J. Watt in Golston spot, which could be a 3, it could be a 5, could be a 4 head up on the tackle. You can move him around, honestly. I mean, you can push other people inside. You know what I mean? You can do different things. You could get JPP off the field. Again, another aging guy like who was banged up all last year and played through it. You can get him off the field a little bit and play Watt on the edge on early down somewhat.
Yes,
and so
he is kind of a chess piece. You can move around.
Yes. But on later downs, you're playing Vea and Watt inside. When you have 4 down, you're playing Vea and Watt inside, and you're playing JPP and Barrett on the edge. And then you're putting JPP or J Watt outside and JPP inside next to Vea. You can just do so much on passing downs. And let's just be real, like that's where the game's won or lost is passing downs. The Bucs led the league. More teams threw the ball against the Bucs in neutral situations than any other team in the league last year, because you have to throw it to beat the Bucs and you can't run it to beat the Bucs. So because of that, it's all this season. Everybody's going to come out throwing the ball against them even more than they did last year, if possible. You've got to find ways to continue to be productive against the pass defensively. To me, it requires even more creativity and more talent probably as pass rushing group.
I think we saw a question about Stephon Gilmore possibly being made available by the Patriots. Mm-hmm. Is that a player that you're interested in trading for? He's in the final year of his deal. He's scheduled to make his cap hit's $15 million, but some of that is restructuring and signing bonuses. So his base salary is only $7 million this year, with a 3.4 or $340,000.
And he's how old?
He's 30. He'll be 30.
Okay, so the trick with Gilmore is that I think he wants to restructure wherever he goes, and that's just probably going to be out of the again. Like the Bucs just aren't going to do that kind of stuff until they've got their guys back. I think. I get the appeal with Gilmore. I'm very much team. You can never have enough good corners,
right?
But I just don't know that it's going to happen for Tampa Bay.
And the thing is obviously you have to give up some compensation, and I don't think the Bucs maybe want to part with their 32nd overall pick, but maybe a second rounder and Jamel Dean. Would you do that trade for Stephon Gilmore?
I don't know that it would even take that much, to be honest, Scott. I think the second rounder is all it would take for Stephon Gilmore. Now, I know he was Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. This past year, he wasn't that great. And also, what is it, 1 more year on his deal right now?
He's in the final year of his deal this year.
Right. So you're getting, so it's like a 1-year rental basically for him. That'll drive the value down to age. I think you could get him for a second. Again, the Bucs picked 32nd, so maybe for the Bucs it would be a first. For most teams, I would say the value would probably be a second rounder for Stephon Gilmore now.
That's what I was saying. If you say Jamel Dean and the team's second round pick, which is almost a third round,
maybe like Jamel Dean and a fourth at that point, because you're in a starting caliber corner. Yeah. I don't think it would take a second and Dean. Just a guess, but I'm no expert on those things. But yeah, but interesting to continue to talk about that, and even DJ Reader and some of these other things. I know we got to scoot for today's podcast, but love the questions. We'll continue to talk. We've got all offseason. We've got the next couple of weeks to talk
about. Tomorrow we have Bruce Arians and Jason Light talking to the media at 3:00. So we will be on at 4:00, or maybe a few minutes after. We'll let you know via Twitter if those interviews go long. But we're going to be getting Bruce and Jason tomorrow. So stay tuned for the Pewter Report podcast tomorrow. We're going to have live instant reaction as those press conferences will either be just wrapping up or wrapped up a little bit before the 4:00 start time. So definitely don't miss tomorrow's show, as the general manager and head coach of the world champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be talking.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a fun show tomorrow, breaking down all things, and we're going to get probably some insight. We got insight last year at the combine when they talked. I think we'll get some more insight even tomorrow. So tomorrow's podcast, definitely want to tune in. Spread the word. Tell your friends. Send them the link. Tell them to subscribe to the podcast. It's free. Hit the bell to get notifications. As for a lot of you, I'll see you on Locker Room tonight for our extended chat on the Bucs and the free agents pool of this offseason. So until then, thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.